The first thing Princess Zarathal noticed when consciousness returned was the taste of copper in her mouth and the sound of industrial mining equipment echoing through the cavern. The second thing she noticed was that her royal guard was nowhere to be found, and the golden circlet that marked her as heir to the Nexary throne was missing from her brow. She pushed herself up from the cold metal floor, her elegant blue skin now covered in grime and bruises. The ceremonial robes that had once marked her status hung in tatters, revealing the truth of her situation. She had been betrayed, stripped of everything, and dumped on this forsaken mining world like discarded cargo. The mining colony of Kepler 442c was about as far from the crystal spires of the Nexary homeworld as one could get. Here, the air was thick with dust, the gravity was slightly too heavy, and the twin suns cast everything in a harsh orange light that made her natural blue coloring appear sickly green. It was the perfect place to dispose of an inconvenient princess. Zarathal had always known that her position as heir was precarious. The Nexary Empire had been built on conquest and expansion, but recent decades had brought internal strife as various noble houses vied for control. Her father, Emperor Zelnoth, had grown old and paranoid, listening more to his advisors than to his daughter. When she had opposed the proposed alliance with the brutal Kethmori Confederacy, she had sealed her fate. The betrayal had come from her own cousin, Duke Veltar, who had convinced the Emperor that Zarathal was plotting rebellion. In a single night, her loyal guards had been replaced, her supporters arrested, and she had been secretly transported to this remote world under the pretense of a diplomatic mission. Now, as she explored the abandoned section of the mining facility where she had been left to die, Zarathal began to understand the full scope of her predicament. The facility had been shut down years ago when the mineral veins were exhausted. The atmospheric processors were failing, and soon the thin atmosphere would no longer support life. She had perhaps a few days before suffocation claimed her. Her captors had been thorough. They had taken her communication devices, her personal weapons, and even her emergency medical kit. All she had left were her wits and her determination to survive long enough to reclaim her throne and exact vengeance on those who had wronged her. The mining facility was vast, a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers carved deep into the planet's crust. Most of the equipment had been stripped away when the operation was abandoned, but some machinery remained, rusted and broken. Zarathal searched methodically, hoping to find something useful, a working communication array, emergency supplies, or perhaps a functional shuttle in one of the hangars. Hours passed as she explored the facility. The twin suns moved across the sky, visible through the cracked transparisteel windows of the main complex. The princess was methodical in her search, checking every room, every storage compartment, every piece of equipment that might offer hope of escape or survival. It was in the facility's administrative section that she first heard the sound, a low, rumbling growl that made her freeze in place. The Nexary had excellent hearing, far superior to most humanoid species, and she could tell that whatever was making that sound was large, possibly predatory, and moving through the corridors somewhere behind her. Kepler 442c was supposed to be devoid of large native life forms. The mining surveys had been thorough in that regard. But perhaps something had changed in the years since the facility was abandoned, or perhaps there were creatures here that the original surveys had missed. Zarathal pressed herself against the wall and moved carefully toward the source of the sound. As heir to the throne, she had received extensive military training, and her natural Nexary agility served her well as she navigated the debris-strewn corridors. The growling grew louder as she approached, but there was something about it that didn't quite sound like a predator preparing to attack. When she finally rounded the corner and peered into the next chamber, what she saw defied all her expectations. Crouched beside a makeshift campfire was a bipedal figure in worn work clothes, and beside him sat what could only be described as a four-legged, furry creature with pointed ears and a long tail. The bipedal figure looked up at her approach, and Zarathal found herself staring into the face of a species she had only heard about in military briefings. The creature was clearly humanoid, but with distinctive features, relatively small eyes, a prominent nose, and skin that was neither scaled nor naturally colored, but a pale pinkish tone. This was a human, one of the species from the small world called Earth that had only recently achieved interstellar travel. "Well, I'll be damned," the human said in heavily accented Galactic standard. "Didn't expect to find anyone else in this old place, especially not someone who looks like royalty." The four-legged creature beside him made the growling sound again, but Zarathul could now see that it wasn't threatening. The creature's tail was moving in what appeared to be a friendly gesture, and its posture was alert but not aggressive. "You are human," Zarathul said, stepping cautiously into the chamber. Her voice carried the melodic quality typical of her species, even when speaking Galactic standard. "Guilty as charged," the human replied, getting to his feet. He was tall by human standards, probably close to 2 meters, with graying hair and weathered features that spoke of years spent under harsh suns. "Name's Jake Morrison. This here's my partner, Rex." He gestured to the four-legged creature, which made a sound that might have been a greeting. "I am." Zarathul hesitated. Revealing her true identity could be dangerous, but something about this human's demeanor suggested honesty. "I am Zarathul. Pleased to meet you, Zarathul. You look like you've had a rough day." Jake's eyes took in her torn robes and obvious distress. "What brings you to this charming vacation spot?" "I was abandoned here. My transportation departed without me." It was technically true, even if it left out the crucial details about betrayal and attempted murder. Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, that happens more often than you'd think out here on the frontier. Mining companies sometimes leave people behind when they pull out, especially if they're trying to cut costs. It's a dirty business." "And you? What brings a human to this world?" "Salvage operation," Jake replied, settling back down beside his fire. "Rex and I specialize in finding useful equipment in abandoned facilities. We've been working this system for about 3 months now. Found some decent stuff, but nothing spectacular." He gestured for her to join him by the fire. "You're welcome to share our camp. This place gets pretty cold at night, and I'm guessing you don't have any supplies." Zarathul studied the human carefully. In all her briefings about the various species of the galaxy, humans had been described as unpredictable, often dangerous, with a tendency toward violence and territorial behavior. But this Jake Morrison seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare, offering aid to a complete stranger without any apparent expectation of reward. "You would help me? Even though we have just met?" "Ma'am, where I come from, you don't leave someone stranded if you can help it. Especially not a lady in distress." Jake's grin was crooked but genuine. "Besides, Rex here seems to like you, and he's a pretty good judge of character." The creature called Rex had indeed moved closer to Zarathul, its tail still moving in that strange, rhythmic way. When she tentatively extended her hand, Rex sniffed it carefully and, then, gently pressed his head against her palm. The sensation was oddly pleasant, and she found herself stroking the creature's soft fur. "What manner of creature is Rex?" "He's a dog. Specifically, a German Shepherd mix." Jake's voice held obvious affection for his companion. "Dogs have been humanity's partners for thousands of years. Rex here has been with me for 8 years, through good times and bad. Haven't you, boy?" Rex made a sound that Zarathul was beginning to understand was an expression of contentment. "I have never heard of such a partnership between species." "Really? That's interesting. Where are you from, if you don't mind me asking? Your accent is pretty distinctive." Zarathul hesitated again. The Nexari Empire had little contact with humanity, and she wasn't certain how much this human knew about galactic politics. "I am from the core systems. A place very far from here." "Ah, one of the big civilizations. That explains the fancy clothes, even if they are a bit worse for wear now." Jake poked at his fire with a metal rod, sending sparks dancing into the evening air. "Well, regardless of where you're from, you're stuck here same as us until our transport arrives." "Your transport?" "My ship's being overhauled on Kepler 442b, the next planet in the system. Should be ready in about a week. My partner's supposed to bring it here when the work's done." Jake studied her face in the firelight. "I'm guessing you don't have a ride coming?" "No," Zarathul admitted. "I do not." "Then, I guess you're coming with us. Can't very well leave you here to die." The casual way he said it, as if offering aid to a stranded alien princess was the most natural thing in the world, left Zarathul momentarily speechless. In her experience, such generosity always came with a price, usually a steep one. "You ask for nothing in return?" Jake looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Should I? You're stranded, I can help." Seems pretty straightforward to me. In my experience, aid is rarely given without expectation of compensation. Well, maybe that's the difference between the core systems and the frontier. Jake's expression grew serious. Out here, people help each other because that's how you survive. Today I help you, maybe tomorrow you help someone else. It's not about keeping score. As if to emphasize the point, Rex moved to lie down beside Zarathul, resting his head on her lap with complete trust. The warmth of the creature was comforting, and she found herself stroking his fur again. "This loyalty of Rex to you," she said carefully, "how was it earned?" "It wasn't earned, exactly. It's just how dogs are. They form bonds with their pack, and they stick with them no matter what." Jake's voice grew thoughtful. "Rex here has saved my life more times than I can count. He's warned me about cave-ins, found me when I was lost in a blizzard on Proxima 7, and once fought off a pack of razor wolves while I was unconscious after a fall. But I never asked him to do any of that. He does it because that's what partners do for each other." "And you? What do you do for Rex?" "Everything I can. I make sure he's fed, keep him healthy, protect him from danger. We take care of each other." Jake reached over to scratch behind Rex's ears. "It's not a complicated relationship. We're family." The concept was alien to Zarathul. In Nexari society, relationships were built on mutual advantage, political necessity, or blood obligation. The idea of such unconditional loyalty freely given and received was difficult for her to comprehend. Over the next few hours, as the twin sun set and the temperature began to drop, Jake shared his supplies with her, a simple meal of protein rations and synthesized vegetables, clean water, and a thermal blanket. He asked no intrusive questions about her past or her circumstances, seemingly content to accept her at face value. Rex remained close to her throughout the evening, and she found his presence surprisingly comforting. When she expressed concern about sleeping arrangements, Jake simply handed her half of his bedroll and said he'd be fine with his jacket and the dying fire. "Aren't you concerned I might be dangerous?" she asked as they prepared to settle in for the night. Jake considered this seriously. "Are you?" I do not know. I have been trained in combat. Most people have, out here. But Rex likes you, and he's got good instincts about these things. Besides," he grinned, "you look more scared than scary right now." As Zarathul lay on the hard floor of the abandoned mining facility, wrapped in a human's blanket with an alien creature pressed against her side for warmth, she reflected on the strangeness of her situation. 12 hours ago, she had been heir to one of the galaxy's greatest empires. Now she was a refugee dependent on the kindness of strangers from a species she had barely heard of. But, for the first time since her betrayal, she didn't feel entirely hopeless. These humans, with their strange concepts of loyalty and their four-legged companions, might be the key to more than just her survival. If she could understand them, perhaps she could learn something that would help her reclaim her throne. The last thing she heard before sleep claimed her was Rex's steady breathing and Jake's quiet humming of some human melody, and she realized that for the first time in her life, she felt truly safe. Zarathul woke to the sound of Rex's gentle whining and the smell of something that might charitably be called food cooking over Jake's portable heating unit. The human was already up, moving around their makeshift camp with the easy efficiency of someone accustomed to rough living. Rex sat nearby, watching her with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to hold more understanding than many sentient beings she had known. "Morning," Jake said without looking up from his cooking. "Hope you slept okay. These old mining facilities aren't exactly five-star accommodations." "I slept well, thank you." It was the truth. Despite the hard floor and unfamiliar surroundings, she had rested better than she had in months. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was the strange sense of safety she felt in the presence of this human and his companion. Jake handed her a portion of the meal, some kind of grain porridge with synthetic fruit flavoring. It wasn't appetizing by Nexary standards, but it was nourishing, and she ate it gratefully. "So," Jake said as they ate, "I've been thinking about your situation. Even if my ship gets here on schedule, we're still talking about hitching a ride to the nearest civilized world, and that's going to be expensive. You got any way to pay for passage?" Zarathul shook her head. "I have nothing of value. Everything was taken from me." "Well, that's a problem. Most transport captains won't take passengers without payment, especially not aliens they don't know." Jake scratched his stubbled chin thoughtfully. "But there might be another way." "What do you mean?" "There's still some valuable equipment in this facility. Rare earth processors, quantum computing cores, that kind of thing. If we can salvage enough of the good stuff, we might be able to trade it for passage off-world for all of us." "You would share your profits with me?" "Like I said yesterday, we're partners now. Partners share the risks and the rewards." Jake stood and brushed crumbs from his clothes. "Question is, are you up for some hard work? Salvage operations can be dangerous." Zarathul considered this. In her life as a princess, she had been trained in many skills: combat, diplomacy, strategic thinking, but physical labor had never been required of her. Still, she was strong, and her natural Nexary agility would be an advantage in navigating the facility's tight spaces. "I am willing to work." "Good. Rex and I could use the help." Jake began packing up their camp. "First thing we need to do is map out the facility properly. I've been working the upper levels, but there are deeper sections I haven't explored yet. That's where the really valuable equipment is likely to be." Over the next few hours, Jake introduced Zarathul to the art of salvage operations. It was more complex than she had expected, requiring not just the ability to identify valuable equipment, but also the skills to safely extract it without damaging delicate components or triggering security systems that might still be active. Rex proved to be an invaluable member of the team. His keen senses could detect gas leaks, unstable flooring, and other hazards long before they became dangerous. More than once, his warning bark saved them from potential cave-ins or exposure to toxic fumes. "How did you train him to do this?" Zarathul asked as they carefully extracted a quantum processor from a buried control room. "I didn't, really. Dogs are naturally good at sensing danger. Rex just learned what to look for through experience." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. "The amazing thing is how he adapted to alien environments. Most Earth animals have trouble with the different atmospheric compositions and gravity levels, but Rex took to space travel like he was born for it." "You have traveled to many worlds together?" "Dozens. We've been from the outer rim to the inner colonies. Rex has walked on more alien planets than most sentient beings ever see." There was obvious pride in Jake's voice. "He's my navigator, my security system, and my best friend all rolled into one." As they worked deeper into the facility, Zarathul began to understand why humans had gained a reputation for being formidable despite their relatively recent entry into galactic civilization. Jake approached each challenge with a combination of ingenuity, determination, and what he called good old-fashioned stubbornness. When they encountered a locked security door, he didn't call for specialized equipment or give up. Instead, he studied the mechanism, experimented with different approaches, and eventually found a way to bypass the locks using spare parts and improvised tools. In the Nexary military academies, Zarathul said as she watched him work, we study the concept of adaptive warfare. The ability to improvise solutions when conventional methods fail. Makes sense. Out here on the frontier, you either learn to adapt or you don't survive long. Jake grunted as he forced open the recalcitrant door. The universe doesn't care about your training or your equipment. It only cares about results. Beyond the security door lay a treasure trove of advanced technology. The facility's main computer core was still intact, along with several quantum processing units and a rare isotope scanner that could be worth a small fortune on the right market. This is remarkable, Zarathul said as she examined the equipment. Some of these components are military grade. Why would a mining facility need such advanced technology? Jake's expression grew thoughtful. Good question. This stuff is way beyond what you'd need for mineral extraction. He pulled up the facility's schematic on a portable scanner. Look at this layout. The mining operations were just surface level. The real facility extends much deeper underground. What do you think they were really doing here? Research, maybe. Or manufacturing. Could be this place was a front for something else entirely? Jake studied the readings more carefully. Whatever it was, they left in a hurry. Most of this equipment should have been wiped or destroyed if they were shutting down properly. As if to emphasize his point, they began to hear a low humming sound from somewhere deeper in the facility. The sound was rhythmic, almost musical, and definitely not natural. There's still power running to something down there, Jake said grimly. Rex, what do you think, boy? Rex had been exploring the chamber with his usual thoroughness, but now he stopped and tilted his head toward the source of the humming. His ears were pricked forward, and his tail had stopped wagging. After a moment, he gave a single, sharp bark. He thinks we should check it out, Jake interpreted. But he's also warning us to be careful. You can understand what he is trying to communicate? After 8 years together, yeah. It's not telepathy or anything like that. I just know how he reacts to different situations. Jake checked his equipment and gestured toward a maintenance shaft that led deeper into the facility. You up for a little more exploring? If there's active equipment down there, it might be worth a lot more than the stuff we've found so far. The maintenance shaft was narrow and dark, requiring them to move single file with Rex leading the way. Zarathul was grateful for her natural agility as they navigated the cramped space. Behind her, she could hear Jake muttering to himself in what she was beginning to recognize as a human habit when faced with challenging situations. The shaft opened into a vast underground chamber that took Zarathul's breath away. The space was enormous, easily large enough to house a small starship, and it was filled with equipment she didn't recognize. The humming sound was louder here, emanating from a series of cylindrical structures that glowed with an eerie blue light. What is this place? She whispered. Jake was studying his scanner with growing excitement. I'm reading massive energy signatures. These aren't mining or manufacturing tools. This looks like... He paused, checking his readings again. This looks like a weapons research facility. The implications hit Zarathul immediately. A secret weapons research facility on a supposedly abandoned mining world, equipped with technology beyond anything she had seen in the Nexari military. If her enemies had access to such resources, it would explain how they had been able to orchestrate her downfall with such precision. We need to leave, she said urgently. If this facility is what you think it is, then being here could be extremely dangerous. But even as she spoke, they heard the sound of mechanical movement from somewhere in the chamber. The humming grew louder, and several of the cylindrical structures began to glow more brightly. Rex growled low in his throat, a sound that carried a clear warning of imminent danger. Automated security systems, Jake said grimly. They must have been triggered when we entered the chamber. He was already moving toward the entrance to the maintenance shaft. Time to go. Now. But, as they reached the shaft entrance, a force field shimmered into existence, blocking their escape route. Similar barriers appeared at other exits around the chamber, trapping them inside with whatever automated systems were now activating. Well, Jake said with forced calm, this is definitely not good. From the cylindrical structures emerged a series of floating drone units, each armed with energy weapons that hummed with barely contained power. The drones began to spread out, clearly programmed to eliminate any intruders they detected. Zarathul, Jake said quietly, I hope that combat training you mentioned includes dealing with military-grade security drones. It does, she replied, her mind automatically shifting into tactical mode. But we are outgunned and outnumbered. We need to find another way out. Rex, Jake called softly, search pattern. Find us an exit. The dog immediately began moving along the chamber's perimeter, his nose to the ground and his senses alert for any opening that might provide escape. Meanwhile, the drones continued their methodical sweep of the chamber, their sensors sweeping back and forth as they searched for targets. The drones are using thermal imaging, Zarathul observed. They have not detected us yet because we are staying behind these equipment banks, but that will not last long. Any ideas for getting past them? Zarathul studied the drones' movement patterns, her military training analyzing their capabilities and weaknesses. They are programmed for facility defense, not combat against trained opponents. Their coordination is efficient but predictable. If we can create a distraction, I might have something for that. Jake pulled a small device from his toolkit. Thermal flare. Salvagers use them to mark equipment sites, but they burn hot enough to overwhelm thermal sensors. That could work. But we would need to time it perfectly, and we would still need an escape route. At that moment, Rex returned from his reconnaissance, moving silently to Jake's side. He pressed his nose against Jake's hand and then looked pointedly toward a section of the chamber wall that appeared to be solid metal. He found something, Jake said. Rex doesn't make mistakes about things like this. Moving carefully to avoid the drone's sensor sweeps, they made their way to the wall section Rex had identified. Up close, Zarathul could see that what appeared to be solid metal was actually a concealed access panel. Emergency maintenance access, Jake said with relief. These old facilities always had multiple exit routes in case of system failures. But the drones will detect us the moment we start opening it. Not if they're busy with something else. Jake prepared his thermal flare. On my mark, get that access panel open as fast as you can. I'll give us some cover. Zarathul positioned herself at the access panel, her fingers finding the manual release controls. Ready. Rex, stay close to Zarathul. Mark. Jake triggered the flare and hurled it toward the far end of the chamber. The brilliant thermal signature immediately drew the attention of every drone in the facility. They converged on the flare's position with military precision, their weapons charging for an attack on what they perceived as multiple heat sources. Zarathul's training took over as she worked the access panel controls. Her nexary fingers were longer and more dexterous than human hands, allowing her to manipulate multiple control systems simultaneously. Within seconds, she had the panel open to reveal another maintenance tunnel. Go, go, go. Jake shouted as the drones began to realize they had been deceived. Rex dove into the tunnel first, followed immediately by Zarathul. Jake was right behind them when the first drone weapons fired, filling the chamber with deadly energy beams that would have killed them all if they had been seconds slower. The maintenance tunnel was even narrower than the first one, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees through a space barely wide enough for Jake's shoulders. Behind them, they could hear the drones attempting to follow, but their bulk prevented them from entering the tunnel. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they emerged into another chamber, this one clearly part of the original mining facility. The familiar industrial equipment was a welcome sight after the alien technology of the weapons research lab. That was way too close, Jake said as they caught their breath. Those drones would have killed us without hesitation. The facility you discovered, Zarathul said carefully, the weapons research. This could be connected to political situations in the core systems. There are factions that would pay enormously for access to such technology. Including the faction that left you here? Zarathul nodded reluctantly. It is possible. If my enemies have been using this facility to develop new weapons, it would explain many recent events. Jake studied her face in the dim light filtering down from the surface levels. Zarathul, I get the feeling there's a lot you haven't told me about who you are and why you're really here. She met his gaze steadily. You are correct. But I did not lie to you. I was abandoned here by those I trusted, and I am grateful for your help. Fair enough. Everyone's got secrets. But if we're going to be partners, I need to know if helping you is going to get Rex and me killed. I cannot guarantee your safety. But I can promise you that if you help me, you will be well rewarded. And if you choose not to help me, I will still be grateful for what you have already done. Jake considered this for a long moment. Rex, who had been sitting quietly during their conversation, moved to position himself between Jake and Zarathul, his head tilted up toward both of them as if listening to their words. "What do you think, boy?" Jake asked. "Should we stick with the lady?" Rex made a soft sound and moved to sit next to Zarathul, placing one paw on her knee. His message was clear. "Well, that settles it. Rex likes you, and he's never wrong about people." Jake grinned. "Guess we're all in this together now. Partners." As they made their way back toward the surface levels of the facility, Zarathul reflected on how much her life had changed in just 2 days. She had lost an empire but gained something she was beginning to think might be more valuable: allies who offered loyalty not because of her title or her wealth, but because it was simply the right thing to do. The weapons facility below changed everything. If she could expose its existence and its connection to her enemies, she might have the leverage she needed to reclaim her throne. But first, she had to survive long enough to get off this world. And, for that, she was increasingly certain that she would need the help of a human salvager and his remarkable four-legged partner. 3 days had passed since their discovery of the weapons facility, and Jake's promised transport had not arrived. What was supposed to have been a routine pickup had turned into an extended stay, and supplies were running dangerously low. More concerning, however, were the signs that they were no longer alone on the planet. Rex had been restless for the past 2 days, his keen senses picking up something that neither Jake nor Zarathul could detect. The dog would stand at the entrance to their current shelter, a maintenance bay in the upper levels of the mining facility, with his ears pricked forward and his nose testing the air. Whatever he sensed, it was making him nervous. "He's been like this before," Jake explained as they watched Rex pace near the entrance. "Usually means there are other people nearby, people he doesn't know." "Could it be your transport?" "No. When it's friendly humans approaching, his whole body language is different. This is his stranger danger alert." Jake checked his equipment, making sure his tools could double as weapons if necessary. "Rex saved my life on Vega Prime by warning me about claim jumpers this same way." Zarathul had been hoping to avoid this complication, but she was beginning to suspect that her exile to this world had not been as secret as her enemies had intended. "Jake, there is something I must tell you about my situation." Before she could continue, Rex gave a sharp bark and retreated from the entrance. Seconds later, they heard the unmistakable sound of a spacecraft landing somewhere near the facility. "That's not my partner's ship," Jake said grimly. "The engine signature is all wrong." They moved carefully to one of the facility's observation windows and peered out at the landing area. A sleek, military-style shuttle had touched down near the main entrance, and armed figures in environmental suits were already disembarking. "Nexari shock troops," Zarathul said quietly, recognizing the distinctive blue and silver armor. "They have found me." "Friends of yours?" "Quite the opposite. Those soldiers served Duke Feltar, the man who orchestrated my exile. They are here to ensure that I never leave this world alive." Jake studied the troops through the window. There were 8 of them, all armed with military-grade energy weapons and equipped with full battlefield sensor suites. "Any particular reason they want you dead so badly?" "Because I am Princess Zarathul, heir to the Nexari throne, and my continued existence threatens their plans for a military coup." She turned to face him directly. "I am sorry I did not tell you the whole truth earlier." To her surprise, Jake simply nodded. "A princess. That explains the fancy clothes and the way you carry yourself. Also explains why you're so good in a crisis." He checked his scanner again. "How long before they track us down?" "Not long. Their equipment can detect life signs from considerable distance, and this facility offers limited hiding places. Then, we need to get creative." Jake was already moving, gathering their salvaged equipment and supplies. "Rex, pack formation." The dog immediately understood, moving to help Jake organize their gear for rapid movement. It was clear that the two of them had been in similar situations before. "Jake, you do not understand. These are elite soldiers trained from childhood for warfare. They will not hesitate to kill anyone who aids me." "Yeah, well, they can try." Jake's voice held a hard edge that Zarathul had not heard before. "But they picked the wrong humans to mess with." "Rex, and I don't abandon friends." You would risk your life for me? Even knowing what I am? Princess, farmer's daughter, or alien queen doesn't matter to me. You're our partner, and that's all Rex, and I need to know. Jake finished packing and shouldered his gear. Besides, I've got an idea that might give us an edge. He led them through the facility's maintenance corridors, moving with the confidence of someone who had spent days mapping every inch of the complex. Rex ranged ahead of them, his senses alert for any sign of the approaching soldiers. Where are we going? Back to that weapons research lab. If we're going to face military hardware, we might as well get our hands on some military hardware. The idea was risky, but Zarathal had to admit it made sense. The weapons in the underground facility were far more advanced than anything the shock troops would be expecting to face. They made their way back through the maintenance shafts, Rex leading the way with Jake close behind. Zarathal brought up the rear, her natural Nexary agility allowing her to move silently through the confined space. When they reached the underground chamber, they found it exactly as they had left it. The security drones had returned to their standby positions, and the weapons systems were dormant but still powered. The question, Jake said as he studied the alien technology, is whether we can figure out how to use any of this stuff without getting killed by our own weapons. Zarathal examined the control panels, her royal education finally proving useful. I recognize some of these symbols. This appears to be based on Kethmori technology, but modified for Nexary use. The Kethmori. Aren't they the ones your people were thinking of allying with? Yes. Which confirms my suspicion that this facility is connected to the political coup against me. She began activating control systems with growing confidence. If Duke Veltar has been working with the Kethmori to develop new weapons, this evidence could be enough to expose his treachery. That's assuming we survive long enough to tell anyone about it. Above them, they could hear the sound of the shock troops entering the upper levels of the facility. The soldiers were moving systematically, checking each room and corridor as they tracked their quarry. They will find the entrance to this level soon, Zarathal said as she continued working with the control systems. These weapons appear to be portable plasma rifles, far more powerful than standard military equipment. Jake picked up one of the weapons, testing its weight and balance. Any idea how to work them? The firing controls are similar to standard Nexary designs. But, Jake, these weapons are designed for warfare between starships. Using them in close quarters could be as dangerous to us as to our enemies. We'll worry about that when the time comes. Jake helped Rex into a specially designed harness that was obviously meant to carry equipment. What else can we use? Zarathal activated another system, and a series of armor plates emerged from hidden compartments. Personal protection systems. They appear to be designed for Nexary physiology, but they might fit you as well. As they equipped themselves with the advanced weapons and armor, Rex stood guard at the entrance to the chamber. Suddenly, his ears pricked up, and he gave a low warning growl. They found the maintenance shaft, Jake said grimly. Time to go. But, as they prepared to leave through the emergency exit they had used before, Zarathal realized something that changed everything. Jake, wait. Look at this control panel. She was standing before what appeared to be a communication system, one far more sophisticated than anything that belonged in a simple research facility. This is a deep space communicator. It can reach anywhere in the galaxy instantly. Her excitement was building as she understood the implications. I can use this to contact my allies in the Nexary military, the ones who remained loyal to my father. Can you do it before those soldiers reach us? I can try. She began working frantically with the communication controls. If I can get a message to General Kethvar, he might be able to dispatch a rescue force. Above them, they could hear the sounds of the shock troops discovering the entrance to the underground level. Heavy footsteps echoed through the maintenance shafts as the soldiers began their descent. They are coming, Jake said, positioning himself with his newly acquired plasma rifle near the entrance. Rex, defensive position. The dog immediately moved to a spot that would allow him to watch multiple approaches while staying behind cover. His training with Jake had prepared him for combat situations, even ones involving alien weapons technology. Zarathul worked desperately with the communication system, trying to establish a connection across the vast distances of space. The technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also complex, requiring precise calibration to reach specific targets. "Almost there," she muttered as she fine-tuned the transmission parameters. "I need just a few more minutes." "I don't think we have a few more minutes," Jake replied as the sounds of approaching soldiers grew louder. The first shock trooper appeared at the entrance to the chamber, his weapon already raised. Jake fired his plasma rifle, and the resulting energy discharge lit up the entire chamber like a miniature sun. The Nexari soldier's armor absorbed most of the blast, but the impact sent him flying backward into the maintenance shaft. "These weapons are incredible," Jake said with something approaching awe. "But they're going to bring down the whole facility if we're not careful." More soldiers appeared at the entrance, laying down suppressing fire as they attempted to enter the chamber. Their weapons were military grade, but they were no match for the experimental technology that Jake and Zarathul had acquired. Rex darted between the equipment banks, using his speed and agility to distract the soldiers and spoil their aim. His presence forced them to split their attention, making them vulnerable to Jake's precisely aimed shots. "Got it!" Zarathul shouted as the communication system finally established connection. "General, this is Princess Zarathul. I am alive and need immediate extraction from Kepler 442c. I have evidence of treasonous collaboration with the Kethmori." The response came through the communicator with crystal clarity. "Your Highness, we thought you were dead. Stand by for emergency extraction. Mark your position with a beacon signal." "I can do that," she replied, activating the facility's emergency beacon. "But, General, be warned. Duke Veltar has shock troops on site attempting to eliminate me." "Understood, Highness. Battle Group Nexar is 3 hours out from your position. Hold your ground until we arrive." 3 hours. They had to survive for 3 hours against elite soldiers in an underground facility with limited cover and no escape routes. Jake had been listening to the conversation while continuing to hold off the attackers. 3 hours, huh? That should be interesting. Another group of soldiers attempted to breach the chamber from a different entrance, but Rex detected their approach and warned Jake in time. The humans' accurate fire with the plasma rifle forced them back, but it was clear that the shock troops were regrouping for a more coordinated assault. "They will try to overwhelm us with numbers," Zarathul said as she checked her own weapon. "Standard Nexari military doctrine for dealing with entrenched opponents. Then, we need to make sure they can't mass their forces." Jake studied the chamber layout, his salvager's experience helping him identify potential advantages. "This place has multiple choke points. If we can control access." He was interrupted by an explosion somewhere above them. The shock troops were using heavy weapons to blast new access routes into the underground level. "Or they could just make their own entrances," he said grimly. Zarathul activated more of the facility's systems, hoping to find something that could help them. "Jake, look at this. Automated defense systems for the entire facility. They were disabled when we arrived, but I might be able to reactivate them." "Do it. Anything that helps even the odds." As she worked with the defense controls, Jake and Rex continued to hold their position. The shock troops had learned to respect the power of the plasma rifles, but they were also adapting their tactics, using flash grenades and smokescreens to disrupt the defenders' vision. "Defense grid coming online," Zarathul announced as status lights began flashing throughout the chamber. "The facility has internal security drones, force field generators, and automated weapons platforms." Throughout the mining complex, dormant systems began awakening. Security drones emerged from hidden alcoves, their sensors scanning for unauthorized personnel. Force fields activated across key corridors, blocking access routes and trapping several shock troopers in dead-end sections. But the most impressive activation was the facility's main defense turret, which rose from a concealed position on the surface and began targeting the shock troopers' shuttle with weapons designed to engage spacecraft. "Your Highness," came General Kethvar's voice through the communicator, "we are detecting massive energy signatures from your location. What is your status?" We have taken control of what appears to be a secret weapons research facility, Zarathul replied. Duke Veltar has been collaborating with the Kethmori to develop new military technology without imperial authorization. Understood. That constitutes high treason. Your Highness, you are ordered to secure all evidence and maintain position until extraction. Acknowledged, General. The activation of the facility's defenses had shifted the balance of the engagement. The shock troops found themselves fighting not just 3 defenders, but an entire automated security system designed to protect military secrets. I think we might actually make it through this, Jake said as he watched security drones herding the remaining soldiers into increasingly limited areas of the facility. Do not underestimate Duke Veltar's forces, Zarathul warned. They would not have come here without a plan for dealing with the facility's defenses. As if summoned by her words, a new sound echoed through the chamber, the distinctive whine of military-grade shield generators powering up. They brought portable shield generators, she said with growing concern. That will allow them to advance despite the automated defenses. Jake checked his weapon's power levels. How much longer until your rescue arrives? 2 hours and 37 minutes. Then, we dig in and make every shot count. Jake looked down at Rex, who was sitting calmly beside him despite the chaos around them. What do you think, boy? Can we hold out for another couple hours? Rex's tail wagged once, which Jake chose to interpret as confidence in their chances. As the shock troops resumed their assault with their new shield protection, Zarathul realized that she had learned something important during this crisis. Loyalty and courage were not unique to her species or limited to those bound by blood or oath. Sometimes they came in unexpected forms, like a human salvager and his 4-legged partner who had chosen to risk everything for someone they barely knew. If she survived to reclaim her throne, she would remember this lesson. The battle had been raging for over an hour, and the situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Despite the facility's automated defenses, the shock troops had managed to establish multiple positions throughout the underground complex. Their portable shield generators allowed them to advance methodically, neutralizing security drones and disabling defensive systems one by one. Jake had proven to be an exceptional combatant, his years of dangerous salvage work having prepared him for life-or-death situations. He moved through the chamber with calculated precision, using his knowledge of the facility's layout to maximum advantage. Rex remained constantly at his side, the dog's keen senses providing early warning of enemy movements that Jake's human limitations might miss. They are adapting faster than I expected, Zarathul admitted as she monitored the facility's defensive systems from the central control station. Duke Veltar must have provided them with detailed intelligence about this place. Makes sense, Jake replied, pausing to reload his plasma rifle with a fresh power cell. If this whole facility was part of his operation, he'd know exactly how to counter its defenses. Another explosion shook the chamber as the shock troops used shaped charges to blast through a reinforced barrier. Their tactical coordination was flawless, the product of years of training and battlefield experience. Rex suddenly perked up, his ears swiveling toward a section of the chamber they had thought was secure. His low growl was barely audible over the sounds of battle, but Jake caught it immediately. Rex says we've got company coming from the maintenance level, Jake warned, already moving to a new firing position. Zarathul checked the facility's internal sensors. Confirmed. 3 soldiers have found an alternate route through the old mining tunnels. They will be here in less than 2 minutes. Any way to seal off that approach? Not without risking a complete system shutdown. The control pathways are too interconnected. She made rapid adjustments to the defensive grid. But I can reroute power to the close-range deterrent systems. The deterrent systems proved to be a series of directed energy projectors designed to discourage unauthorized access to sensitive areas. When the first shock trooper emerged from the maintenance tunnel, he was met with a focused beam of energy that overloaded his armor's protection systems and sent him tumbling back into the shaft. Nice, Jake said appreciatively. Any more tricks like that? A few. But each system I activate draws power from our primary defenses. We are fighting a war of attrition, and they have more resources than we do. Through the facility's communication system, they could hear the shock troops coordinating their final assault. The soldiers had overcome their initial surprise at encountering advanced weapons and automated defenses, and they were now implementing a systematic plan to eliminate all resistance. "Princess Zarathul," came a new voice through the facility's speakers. The tone was cultured, aristocratic, and coldly confident. "This is Duke Veltar. I know you can hear me." Zarathul's expression hardened with anger and recognition. "My dear cousin. I wondered when you would reveal yourself." "I had hoped it would not come to this," the Duke continued. "Your exile to this world was intended to be permanent but peaceful. You could have lived out your days in obscurity, and no further harm would have come to you." "Peaceful?" Zarathul's voice carried all the royal authority she had been trained to project. "You call abandoning me on a dead world without supplies or communications peaceful? I call it merciful. More merciful than you deserve after interfering with imperial policy and undermining military preparations for the coming war." Jake had been listening to the exchange while keeping watch for enemy movements. "War? What war?" "The war against the human expansion," Duke Veltar replied, clearly having overheard the question. "Your species has grown too powerful too quickly, human. The Nexari Empire cannot allow Earth to continue building its alliance network unchecked. So you decided to ally with the Kethmori instead," Zarathul said. "A species known for their brutality and their policy of enslaving conquered populations. A species with the military strength necessary to contain the human threat. Your father's policies of cautious observation and limited engagement are the path to eventual defeat." Jake's expression had grown grimmer as he listened to the Duke's words. "You're planning to attack Earth?" "I am planning to save the galaxy from human dominance," the Duke replied. "This facility has been instrumental in developing the weapons necessary for that task." Zarathul activated the communication system's recording function, ensuring that every word of the Duke's confession would be preserved. This evidence alone would be enough to expose his treachery to the Imperial Council and the Emperor himself. "You see why you cannot be allowed to leave this world alive," the Duke continued. "You know too much about our operations, and your survival would complicate our political arrangements." "The only thing that will be complicated," Zarathul replied, "is your explanation to the Emperor when my rescue force arrives and finds evidence of your collaboration with aliens against your own people." There was a pause before the Duke responded, and, when he did, his voice carried a note of satisfaction that sent chills through the defenders. "Your rescue force will find only the wreckage of a mining facility destroyed by an unfortunate industrial accident. My ships are already in position to intercept any Nexari vessels that approach this system." Through the facility's external sensors, Zarathul could see what the Duke meant. Several Kethmori warships had emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system, their massive forms bristling with weapons designed for ship-to-ship combat. "General Kethvar and his forces are walking into a trap," she said quietly to Jake. "Can you warn them?" "I can try." She began working with the communication system, attempting to establish a new connection to the approaching rescue force. But the Duke's ships may be jamming long-range communications. The assault on their position intensified as the shock troops received new orders. Explosions echoed through the chamber as heavy weapons were brought to bear on the defenders' positions. The facility's automated systems were failing one by one, overwhelmed by the sustained attack. Rex had positioned himself near one of the chamber's alternate entrances, his acute hearing allowing him to track enemy movements through the facility's ventilation system. When he detected soldiers attempting to use the air ducts to bypass the main defenses, his sharp bark warned Jake in time to redirect fire and stop the flanking maneuver. "That dog of yours is worth his weight in platinum," Zarathul said as she continued attempting to contact the rescue force. "Rex has saved my life more times than I can count," Jake replied, firing another precisely aimed shot that forced two shock troopers to seek cover. "He's family." The concept of family based on choice rather than blood was still new to Zarathul, but she was beginning to understand its power. Jake's loyalty to Rex and his willingness to risk everything for her represented something that her royal upbringing had never prepared her to recognize, the strength that came from genuine emotional bonds rather than political alliances. Connection established, she announced as her communication finally reached the approaching Nexari forces. General Kethvar, abort your approach immediately. Kethmori warships are waiting in ambush at the edge of the system. Confirmed, Your Highness. We have them on sensors now. 3 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought. We are outnumbered but not outclassed. General, you must not engage them directly. This entire operation is part of a conspiracy involving Duke Veltar. Evidence of treason and unauthorized weapons development is contained within this facility. Understood. We will attempt to reach your position, but our approach will be delayed while we deal with the Kethmori forces. The communication ended, leaving the defenders to face the reality that they would have to hold their position for much longer than originally planned. The shock troops seemed to sense that the situation had changed, because their assault became even more aggressive. They know help is coming, Jake observed as enemy fire intensified around their position. They're trying to finish this quickly. Then, we make sure they don't succeed. Zarathal activated the facility's emergency protocols, sealing blast doors and rerouting power to the most critical defensive systems. Jake, I need you to know something. If we do not survive this, it has been an honor to fight beside you and Rex. We're not dead yet, Princess. And, where I come from, we don't give up until the last shot is fired. As if summoned by his words, Rex came racing back from his sentry position, his urgent barking indicating that the final assault was about to begin. Through the facility's internal sensors, they could see shock troopers massing at multiple entry points, preparing for a coordinated attack that would overwhelm their remaining defenses. This is it, Jake said, checking his weapon one last time. Rex, close protection formation. The dog immediately moved to position himself where he could guard both human allies, his intelligence allowing him to understand the gravity of the situation they faced. The first wave of the assault came from 3 directions simultaneously. Shock troopers poured through breached barriers and demolished walls, their energy weapons laying down suppressing fire as they advanced. The chamber filled with the sound of weapons fire and explosions as the final battle began. Jake's accuracy with the plasma rifle was extraordinary, each shot finding its mark with lethal precision. But there were simply too many enemies, and their ammunition was running low. Zarathal fought beside him, her royal training in combat serving her well as she coordinated their defensive fire. Rex darted between their positions, his speed and agility allowing him to distract enemy soldiers at crucial moments. When one shock trooper managed to get close enough for a killing shot at Jake, Rex launched himself at the soldier's weapon hand, spoiling his aim and giving Jake time to return fire. But their situation was becoming hopeless. The facility's defenses were failing, their ammunition was almost exhausted, and the enemy was closing in from all sides. It was then that Zarathal noticed something on the facility's external sensors that changed everything. Jake, look, she shouted over the noise of battle, pointing to a display screen showing the space around the planet. In the distance, barely visible against the stars, was the distinctive energy signature of human starships dropping out of hyperspace. Not just 1 or 2 vessels, but an entire fleet moving with the coordinated precision of a military task force. Cavalry's arrived, Jake said with grim satisfaction. Rex, looks like we might make it through this after all. The dog's tail wagged once, a gesture of confidence that somehow seemed perfectly appropriate in the middle of a desperate firefight. As the human fleet moved toward the planet, the tide of battle throughout the system began to shift. The Kethmori forces found themselves caught between the approaching Nexari rescue force and an unexpected human intervention that would change the course of galactic politics forever. But, in the underground chamber where a princess, a salvager, and a loyal dog continued their desperate stand, the immediate concern remained simple survival until help could arrive. The arrival of the human fleet had caught everyone by surprise, including the shock troopers who were still fighting their way through the facility's defenses. In the brief pause that followed the first sighting of human vessels, Zarathal managed to establish communication with the lead ship. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," came a crisp, professional voice through the facility's communicators. "We received a distress beacon from this location and are responding to provide humanitarian assistance. Admiral, this is Princess Zarathal of the Nexari Empire. I am under attack by hostile forces and request immediate extraction." "Confirmed, Princess. We have Nexari military vessels in this system as well. Are they friendly forces? Yes, Admiral. They are my rescue force, but they are currently engaged with Kethmori warships that were lying in ambush. There was a brief pause before Admiral Chen responded. Understood. We're detecting weapons fire from the planet's surface directed at your position. Stand by for close support. Jake had been listening to the exchange while continuing to hold off the shock troopers' assault. Human military? How did they know to come here? I do not know, Zarathul admitted, but their timing is remarkable. The answer came from an unexpected source, Rex, who was sitting near the communication console with his head tilted toward the speakers. As Jake watched, the dog moved to a particular control panel and placed his paw on a specific switch. Son of a gun, Jake said with amazement. Rex activated an emergency beacon. He must have done it when we first discovered this place. But how could he know what it was? He's been with me to a dozen different facilities. He's seen me use emergency beacons before, and he's smart enough to recognize the pattern. Jake scratched behind Rex's ears. You called for help without any of us realizing it, didn't you, boy? Rex's tail wagged, and, for a moment, the chaos of battle seemed less overwhelming. The sound of approaching aircraft interrupted their brief respite. Through the facility's external sensors, they could see human dropships descending toward the planet's surface, their weapons already engaging the shock troopers' positions. This is Major Rodriguez of the 82nd Airborne, came a new voice through the communicator. Princess, can you mark your exact position? We have multiple heat signatures in that facility, and we need to know which ones are friendly. Zarathul activated the facility's emergency beacon, sending a coded signal that would identify their specific location. Beacon active, Major. We are 3 humans deep underground in the weapons research section. 3 humans? 2 humans and 1 canine, Jake corrected with a grin. Don't forget Rex. Within minutes, the sound of weapons fire from above began to change as human forces engaged the shock troopers from multiple directions. The elite Nexari soldiers found themselves caught between the facility's remaining automated defenses and a coordinated assault by Earth's military forces. They are retreating, Zarathul observed as she monitored the facility's sensors. The shock troopers are falling back to their shuttle. Not if I can help it, came Duke Veltar's voice through the communicator, now tinged with desperation and anger. If I cannot eliminate you quietly, Princess, then I will ensure that this entire facility and all its evidence is destroyed. Through the external sensors, they could see the Duke's personal shuttle approaching the planet from orbit, its weapons charging for what appeared to be an orbital bombardment. He means to destroy the entire facility from space, Zarathul said with growing alarm. The weapons he is carrying could level everything within kilometers of here. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the communication channel. Nexari vessel, you are targeting a facility containing friendly forces. Cease your attack immediately or we will be forced to intervene. Human ships, withdraw immediately or face the consequences, Duke Veltar replied. This is an internal Nexari matter that does not concern your species. Admiral, Zarathul said urgently, Duke Veltar is a traitor who has been working with the Kethmori to develop weapons for use against Earth. This facility contains evidence of his treachery and plans for an attack on human worlds. The response from Admiral Chen was immediate and decisive. Duke Veltar, you are hereby designated as a hostile target. Human vessels, weapons free. The space battle that followed was brief but decisive. Duke Veltar's shuttle was heavily armed, but it was no match for an entire human fleet. Within minutes, the threat of orbital bombardment had been eliminated, and the Duke's ship was drifting powerless in space. On the planet's surface, the remaining shock troopers had been overwhelmed by the combined forces arrayed against them. Human dropships landed near the facility, and soon the underground complex was secured by Earth Defense Force Marines working alongside General Kethvar's Nexari troops. When the first human soldiers reached the weapons research chamber, they found Jake, Zarathul, and Rex sitting calmly beside the massive alien technology that had started the entire crisis. Ma'am, said the lead Marine, a sergeant with the weathered look of a career soldier, are you injured? We are all unharmed, Sergeant, Zarathul replied with the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. Thanks to my companions and their remarkable courage. The sergeant looked at Jake and Rex with obvious curiosity. Sir, may I ask what a civilian salvager is doing in the middle of a military operation? Wrong place, wrong time, Sergeant, Jake replied easily. But it worked out okay in the end. Over the next several hours, as the facility was secured and its contents documented, the full scope of Duke Veltar's conspiracy began to emerge. The weapons research facility had been operating for over 2 years, developing technology specifically designed to counter human military advantages. The evidence of collaboration with the Kethmori was overwhelming, including communication records, weapons prototypes, and detailed intelligence about human fleet movements. This information will change everything, General Kethvar said as he reviewed the data with Admiral Chen and Princess Zarathul. Duke Veltar's faction has been preparing for war against humanity while publicly supporting peaceful coexistence. The question now, Admiral Chen said, is how we proceed. This conspiracy involved high-ranking Nexari officials and an alliance with the Kethmori. The implications for galactic politics are enormous. Zarathul had been thinking about this same question. Admiral, General, I propose that this crisis can become an opportunity. Duke Veltar's treachery has damaged relations between our peoples, but it has also demonstrated the value of cooperation between humans and Nexari. What do you mean? Admiral Chen asked. The humans who saved my life did so not because of political calculation or strategic advantage, but because it was the right thing to do. They risked everything to protect someone they barely knew. She looked at Jake and Rex, who were being examined by a human medical team. That kind of loyalty and courage is rare in galactic politics. You're suggesting an alliance? I am suggesting something more than an alliance. I am suggesting a true partnership, based on shared values rather than mutual convenience. Zarathul's voice carried the conviction of someone who had experienced a fundamental change in perspective. Jake Morrison and Rex demonstrated qualities that my people need to learn. If we can build relationships based on that model, both our species will be stronger for it. General Kethvar nodded slowly. Your Highness, your father the Emperor will want to hear your recommendations directly. This evidence of Duke Veltar's treachery will require a complete reassessment of imperial policy. Then, we shall present it together, Nexari and human representatives working as partners. She turned to Admiral Chen. Admiral, would Earth be willing to participate in such discussions? I think I can safely say that Earth would be very interested in that possibility, Chen replied. Especially given what we've learned about Kethmori intentions. As the various military forces prepared to depart the planet, Jake found himself in an unexpected conversation with Princess Zarathul. They stood near his salvage equipment, which seemed primitive and mundane next to the advanced alien technology that filled the facility. Jake, she said carefully, my position as heir to the Nexari throne will be restored, and I will have considerable influence in imperial policy. I want to offer you a position as an advisor to the royal court. Jake looked surprised. Princess, I'm honored, but I'm just a salvager. I don't know anything about politics or diplomacy. You know about loyalty, courage, and making the right choice when it matters most. Those are the qualities I need in my advisors. She paused, watching Rex as he explored the chamber one last time. Besides, Rex would be welcome at court as well. I think my people need to learn about the kind of partnership you two have. That's a generous offer, but, Rex and I like our freedom. We're not really the type for palace life. Then, perhaps we can arrange something different. An advisory position that allows you to continue your current work while occasionally consulting on matters involving human-Nexari relations. Zarathul smiled. I suspect there will be many opportunities for cooperation in the future. Jake considered this. What do you think, Rex? Want to be advisors to an alien princess? Rex wagged his tail and made a sound that Jake chose to interpret as agreement. Well, I guess that settles it, Jake said. But, I have one condition. Name it. No fancy titles. We're just Jake and Rex, partners in whatever comes next. Agreed, Zarathul said solemnly. Partners. 6 months later, the first joint human Nexary research station was established in orbit around a neutral world. The facility was designed to develop defensive technologies that could be shared between the two species, protecting both from threats like the Kethmori Confederacy. The station's first commander was Admiral Chen, working in partnership with General Kethvar. But the facility's most popular residents were its chief technology advisors, a human salvager named Jake Morrison, and his four-legged partner Rex, who had somehow become symbols of the new alliance. Rex, in particular, had become something of a celebrity among the Nexary crew members. His loyalty, intelligence, and unwavering dedication to his human partner had captured their imagination in ways that formal diplomatic treaties never could. "You know," Jake said one day as he watched Rex playing with a group of young Nexary officers, "I never thought I'd end up as a diplomat." "You are not a diplomat," Princess Zarathal replied, now wearing the uniform of the station's executive officer. "You are something far more valuable, you are a friend." As they watched Rex demonstrate to his audience how to properly fetch a thrown object, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed. He had set out as a simple salvager looking for scrap metal and equipment. Instead, he had found himself at the center of events that would shape the future of two species. But the most important discovery had been one that Rex had made without any training or instruction, that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was as simple as refusing to abandon someone who needed help, regardless of species, politics, or personal cost. It was a lesson that both humans and Nexary were still learning, but, with teachers like Rex, Jake was confident they would figure it out eventually. After all, if a dog could understand it, how hard could it be?